In the quiet, close-knit town of Kapunda, South Australia, the Rowe family was known for their peaceful, happy life. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where doors were left unlocked and neighbors could be counted on. The Rowe family, with their simple but comfortable home, embodied everything that made Kapunda feel safe. Andrew Rowe, a friendly man who had moved to Australia as a child, was well loved in the community. He had a warm, easygoing nature that made him everyone's friend, and he enjoyed life's little pleasures, like fishing with his dad. His wife, Rose, was his perfect match, lively, warm, and the kind of woman whose smile could light up a room. They had built their life together, and by 2010, their children were their pride and joy. Their son, Christopher, had already moved out, living with his fiancée. Chantel, their 16-year-old daughter, still lived at home. She was a hard worker, balancing a part-time job at a local cafe while finishing school. Life seemed to be going smoothly for the Rowe family, but that year, everything changed. Chantel had found out she was pregnant, and though it was a difficult situation, she was determined to raise her child with the support of her boyfriend, Dylan. The night of November 7th, 2010, started like any other in the Rowe household. It was calm, quiet, and everyone was going about their evening routines. But by the time the clock struck midnight, everything would be shattered. What began as a peaceful night turned into a nightmare no one could have predicted. Just after midnight, a scream pierced the stillness of the night, followed by another. Chaos erupted inside the Rowe family's home. Someone had broken in. Someone had turned their world upside down in the blink of an eye. Outside, everything looked the same the next morning. But inside, everything was different. The tragedy of that night would soon shake Kapunda to its core, and no one would ever be the same again. 2 days later, the truth would begin to surface. Neighbors, sensing something was wrong, peeked through the windows and saw a horrific scene inside the Rowe house. Andrew and Rose were found in the kitchen, their bodies mutilated beyond recognition. Chantel was found in her bedroom, also brutally attacked. The police were left with more questions than answers. Who could have done this? And why? The Rowe family had no enemies, no secrets, just a simple, loving life. The brutality of the crime made no sense. Why were they targeted? It would take weeks for investigators to uncover the chilling truth. But the questions kept piling up. What had happened that night? Who was responsible for such a violent and senseless crime? In the aftermath of the murders, Kapunda was left reeling. The quiet, peaceful town had been turned upside down. The Rowe family was loved by everyone. Andrew, Rose, and Chantel had no known enemies, no reason to be targeted. Yet, someone had brutally ended their lives. The police investigation was now in full swing, but the more they uncovered, the more questions arose. With Christopher still in Queensland, thousands of miles away, he was quickly ruled out as a suspect. He had an airtight alibi, but the horror of hearing about the murders, on social media no less, shattered him. When he finally got the call confirming his worst fear, the relief he had felt was brief. The pain set in almost immediately. His family was gone. Andrew had been stabbed 29 times. Rose 50 times. Chantel 33. But there was something even more disturbing. Chantel had been sexually assaulted before her death. The brutality of the crime shocked even the most seasoned officers in Adelaide. The scene was like something out of a nightmare. Blood splattered across walls, floors, even the ceiling. There was no doubt this was not a random attack. This wasn't about theft or a spur-of-the-moment crime. No, this had been personal, something far darker. But the question lingered, why? Why this family? And who could have done such a thing? As the police dug deeper, a chilling discovery was made. Whoever did this didn't just kill and flee. They took their time. The killer had lingered, even changing into clean clothes. The footprints they left in the blood told a disturbing story, carefully placed, leading to the front door, then abruptly stopping. It was almost as if the killer had purposefully taken off their shoes, as if they knew the importance of not leaving any evidence behind. But what was even more unsettling was the fact that nothing was taken from the house. Nothing of value had been stolen. The attack wasn't about robbery. It was about something far more sinister. The police were at a standstill. There were no signs of forced entry. No broken windows, no signs of a struggle. It was as if the killer had been invited in, or had found a way to slip inside unnoticed. Could it have been someone the Rowe family knew? Could it have been someone they trusted? The brutality of the crime pointed to something more personal, more calculated. For days, the investigation was filled with frustration. The police had no leads. There were no obvious suspects. Andrew, Rose, and Chantel had always been kind, welcoming, and well-liked. They had no known enemies. They weren't involved in any conflicts. They hadn't even been part of any local controversies. Everything about their lives seemed perfect, until that one night that changed everything. The questions mounted, but answers remained elusive. Then, just when it seemed like the case might stall, something shocking came to light. The police found traces of a strange, disturbing detail. Evidence of a sexual assault on Chantel's body. The horror of that discovery only added to the weight of the case. Why had this happened? And who could have done such a thing? The more they searched, the more it seemed like the killer had carefully planned the attack. There were no signs of a struggle between the victims and the killer. It almost seemed like they had expected it to happen, like they knew what would unfold. And then came the most chilling discovery yet. Someone had tried to cover their tracks. The killer had taken the knives used in the attack, wiping down surfaces as if they thought they could erase the evidence. The police were left with a haunting truth. Whoever committed this crime wasn't just someone who acted in the heat of the moment. They were someone who had thought it through, planned it, and acted with cold precision. As the police continued their investigation, the pressure mounted. The community, still reeling from the horror, began to demand answers. Who did this? Why? Was there something about the Rowe family's life that had led to this? Or was it all just an unimaginable act of evil? As the weeks went by, the case grew colder, and the community's grief deepened. People in Kapunda found it hard to believe that something so horrific could happen in their town, to a family they had all known and loved. But as the investigation pressed on, something strange started to happen. A lead, though unexpected, began to surface. The police began looking into Chantel's social circle more closely. Her friends, her acquaintances, could one of them have been involved in this terrible act? They turned to Dylan, Chantel's boyfriend. Dylan had been with Chantel for over a year. They had dreams together, plans for the future. He seemed devastated by her death. His alibi checked out. He had been in a different city celebrating his grandfather's wedding. But still, the police had to be thorough. They interviewed him, checked his story, and made sure there was nothing they had missed. Dylan was devastated, but he had no involvement in the crime. His alibi was solid, and with that, the police were left with a new wave of questions. But just when the case seemed to be at a dead end, a breakthrough came, one that no one could have predicted. Chantel's phone, still in the house, had been used after her death. A text from Dylan, asking how she was feeling, had been seen, but not replied to. As the investigation uncovered more disturbing facts, it was revealed that the killer had, in fact, tried to reply to Dylan's message, making it seem as though Chantel was still alive. But the message never went through. Chantel's phone had no credit, and the killer's attempt to cover up their tracks fell short. The investigation now had a new lead, one that would take them to Jason Alexander Downey, a 17-year-old who had been friends with Dylan but was only an acquaintance of Chantel. Jason was quiet, a little reserved, and didn't seem to have a strong connection with the Rowe family. He wasn't someone anyone would expect to be involved in such a horrific crime. But when he was questioned, everything began to unravel. At first, Jason seemed calm, even too calm. His responses to the officers' questions were vague, and his demeanor was oddly detached. As the interview went on, he offered an alibi without being asked. He claimed to have been at home alone that night, but something about his story didn't add up. His behavior raised red flags. When asked about his whereabouts during the murders, Jason became defensive and avoided answering direct questions. But it wasn't just his words that were troubling. His hands had fresh cuts on them, too neat to be accidental. When pressed about the cuts, Jason claimed they came from an accident at a machine shop. However, the cuts didn't look like they were from a shop accident. They looked more like someone who had held a knife. The detectives took Jason's fingerprints and DNA for comparison. And that's when the horrifying truth came to light. Jason's DNA matched the evidence found at the crime scene. His prints were found on Chantel's bedroom door. The evidence was undeniable. Jason Downey was the killer. Jason was the last person anyone would have suspected. He wasn't big or intimidating, and he hadn't been known for violent behavior. But deep inside him, something darker had been growing, a sense of rejection, obsession, and rage. It turned out that Jason had always had feelings for Chantel, but she had never been interested in him. In fact, when Chantel found out she was pregnant, Jason's jealousy turned into something more dangerous. He couldn't stand the idea that Dylan, not him, was the father of her child. The rejection hurt him in a way he couldn't handle. On the night of November 7th, 2010, Jason lost control. What started as a drive by Chantel's house turned into something far worse. Jason parked his car down the street, making sure no one saw him. He sneaked into the row home through a small bathroom window. Once inside, he waited for nearly 30 minutes, sitting in the dark, watching. He claimed he just wanted to talk to Chantel, but if that were the case, why had he taken a kitchen knife with him? Why did he walk into her room carrying a weapon? Chantel immediately sensed something was wrong when Jason entered her room. She fought him off, but in that moment Jason snapped. His rage overtook him, and he violently attacked her. The noise of the struggle woke up her parents, Andrew and Rose, and they rushed to help. But Jason was too far gone, filled with anger and a twisted sense of entitlement. He attacked them too. Andrew was stabbed 29 times. Rose was stabbed over 50 times. Chantel, 33 times. After the murders, Jason tried to explain his actions, saying it was a crime of passion. But the evidence suggested something much darker. This was not a crime born from a sudden fit of rage. It was premeditated, carefully thought out, and executed with terrifying precision. Jason had gone into that house with the intention to kill. As the investigation continued, more damning evidence came to light. Jason's DNA had been found on Chantel's body. He had even attended the Rowe family's funeral, where he pretended to mourn the loss of people he had just killed. It was almost as if he believed he could get away with it, that his mask of grief could cover up the truth. Jason's story continued to fall apart. At first, he claimed he had no memory of killing the Rowe family. He changed his story multiple times, but each time, the evidence contradicted him. When the police asked him about his behavior at the funeral, Jason shrugged it off, as though he wasn't fazed by the severity of the crime. His nonchalance during the trial was even more unsettling. He showed no genuine remorse. He admitted guilt, but it was clear he wasn't sorry. It was a strategic move, an attempt to receive a lighter sentence. In April 2012, nearly a year after the murders, Jason Downey was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 35 years. If he had not pleaded guilty, he would have had to serve at least 45 years before being eligible for parole. But even that didn't seem like enough for the people who knew the Rowe family. Christopher Rowe, who had lost his entire family in one night, carried the pain with him every single day. During the trial, he couldn't even find the words to describe his grief. Instead, his cousin spoke on his behalf, saying, "The lives of my dad, mom, and sister were viciously taken, and yet their killer will have a chance at freedom one day, while we, their family, continue to serve a life sentence of grief." Christopher later took over his father's carpet cleaning business and renamed it Rowe's Choice Carpet Cleaning, in honor of his mother. But no matter what he did, no matter how hard he tried to rebuild, his family was gone. Jason Downey, meanwhile, remains incarcerated at the Moreland Juvenile Detention Center, serving his sentence in South Australia. His life, and the lives of everyone connected to the Rowe family, have been forever altered by the events of that fateful night. What do you think? Should Jason have received a harsher sentence, or does spending decades in prison, knowing he will never truly be free, seem like the right punishment? Thank you for watching. If this story shocked you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more true crime cases that uncover the most unthinkable truths. Share your thoughts in the comments, and as always, stay alert, stay safe, and remember the lives behind every headline.